Hi everybody, welcome to another Bruce the Monk video. This one might be the one that gets me kicked off the interwebs, or YouTube at least, but we'll see. I'm planning on posting it also up elsewhere, so check that link in the description, or I'll probably make it, if it gets taken down and my whole profile doesn't get deleted, then I will put it elsewhere, and I'll make sure that you have the links available. Alright, so today this is me. I mostly only do reaction videos, and we were looking at, because of a conversation on Facebook, I was looking at a conversation about impacts and harms and influences about like gay parenting and the homosexual lifestyle. And this is not going, I'm not setting out to do any, I don't have any particular agenda. And people, if you watch to the end, you might be surprised at my conclusions. We're going to walk through the New Family Structure Study, and this came out about 10 years ago. It was done by a sociologist in Texas. Okay, Dr. Mark Regnerus of the Population Research Center, University of Texas, Austin. They go through. This is, among other things, this is an incredible study, right? If you're doing kind of a sociological study or survey work of some kind, getting 1,000 people is a respectable sample size. They screened 15,000 people and interviewed 2,988. So for all intents and purposes, they interviewed 3,000 people, 3 times kind of the recommended or standard sampling size. They wanted to be really thorough. And they were looking at the kind of assumed position of the academic world that children raised by gay or lesbian parents had no worse, and in some cases better, results than children raised by heterosexual parents. Now, what makes the family structure study really unique is before the NFSS, the New Family Structure Study, I just can't say that over and over, so it's NFSS. So before the NFSS, how sociological and other psychological studies of children raised by gay households went was the people would call up the parents, sociologists would call up the parents, ask the parents how well adjusted and how well everything was, and whether their family structure had any impact on their kids. Shockingly, if you call someone and say, "So, is your choice of lifestyle or your behavior patterns negatively impacting your children?" they're mostly going to say, "Yeah, no," and the kids are not, or by and large, were not involved. So what the NFSS did was, and this was what makes it so mind-blowing, is they did not ask the parents. This incredible sample size are all young adults, 18 to 39, and who were raised by a wide variety of family structures, and including some LGBT ones, and divorce, step parent, single parented. So this isn't a clobber research, right? It isn't just out to attack. It was an assessment, and I think you'll be surprised sometimes by what they actually found. We're going to go through that. So wanted to say, so this is the very first really large study where the kids raised in various family structures were allowed to tell the researchers directly, because 18 and up, they're out from under their parents' roofs. Their well-being doesn't depend on what they say. They're able to tell the researchers directly what they experienced, and the researchers cataloged it. That's all this study is. We're just going to go through those results, and I'll talk a little bit at the end about my conclusions. I am not trying to make this a really long video. I'm going to go as quickly as I think I can and still make the information understandable. So we're gonna go right to the outcomes. We're gonna look at the legend really quick. So you're gonna see they're color coded. The score for the intact biological family, which is still the kind of the standard, or not in terms of assigning a morality for a sociological study, but this is the normal. This is the majority experience, or has been the majority experience for the majority of human history. So from a scientific sociological perspective, that's a valid baseline. Let's go from the default starting point and then look and compare and contrast, right? So that's not an attack. If a score was significantly different statistically from the intact biological family score, IBF, because again, There's just so much detail. We're going to say IBF. Then it's highlighted in orange, which you can see. And if it is not statistically different, then it was left hollow. So there is no highlighting color. So that's going to color the code. So that's it. We're just going to jump into what the largest, most groundbreaking study. This is actually the second largest study ever for this question, but it is the largest study that has ever gone to the children themselves. And it really kind of revolutionized the thoughts about what methods you would use to establish what the experience was. People were sitting down and going through this. We're just going to jump right into it. I want to get through this as quickly and dispassionately as possible. So, marijuana use. Frequency of marijuana use in the last 12 months. 1 is never, 6 almost daily. The lowest marijuana use, 1.32. Adopted families, so what were the non-statistical deviations? So within one standard deviation, adopted families had the next best outcome, 1.33. Step family, a recombined family, 1.47, and a gay father, a father in a gay relationship. Also is not a significantly statistical deviation. The deviations came from having a single parent families, a mother in a lesbian relationship, and what I think you're going to find, what I find when I was going through this, is probably the most damaging family structure is a later divorce. So this is a divorce where, the family was intact for the early stages of childhood, and, 10, 11, 15, the family rips apart. And then why does marijuana use matter? Because, after all, it's becoming legal everywhere. More and more literature is coming out associating marijuana with paranoia, low functionality, loss of IQ, and particularly in adolescence is a massive increase in late onset schizophrenia, right? So the narrative from the 90s, there's no science that says it's bad, man. That's been falling apart increasingly as we get more and more research and more science, as more marijuana use is legalized. So smoking, which people, for 20 years, America was on an anti-smoking campaign. Let's look at smoking. 1 to 6, 1 is never, 6 is almost daily. Lowest incidence of smoking, intact biological family. And that's it. That is it. A statistic, at least one standard deviation higher for every other family structure in the in this. Second lowest single family. Adopted and step family are following that up, but still vastly higher. This time, divorce, which was the late divorce, was worse than adopted as step family, but parents in gay relationships was the highest indicator for smoking in children for a family structure. That's not really surprising, given that even pro-gay advocates, I'm going to cover that in my next video, assuming my channel doesn't get taken down for this. Even pro-gay medical advocates will admit that chemical abuse, alcohol, smoking, and drug abuse is significantly higher in the gay population than it is among the heterosexual population. Criminal, so number of times arrested, and 1, never, 4, numerous times. All right, big surprise here. The intact family is it gives you the lowest possible chance of being arrested. Adopted is the second best outcome, and you're going to see that a lot. This is something that I found really interesting when I was going through this, because kind of what everyone knows myth is that adopted children know that they're rejected, etc. What we're actually finding out, the more you talk to people, is adopted kids know that they were chosen. They know that they were wanted, they were sought out, they were taken in on purpose. No adopted kid is there because he has to be, which you can sometimes hear from narratives in step families or single parents, etc. An adopted kid knows that they were chosen on purpose. What really kind of surprised me on this one was a divorce later, which really, really rivals is probably overall the worst possible thing you can do as we're going through this. I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but this one is not statistically significant. So, continuing on, pled guilty to a non-minor offense. The lowest possible outcome for criminal history is intact biological family. Adopted and divorced later are still coming in second. And single parent, step family, gay father, and and lesbian mother are all statistically above average. Public assistants are being currently on public assistance, and this was an American study, and Americans. One thing I want to point out: American society is notoriously fluid, and unlike other societies that are more rooted in kind of a class oriented history. This is actually something that I thought was really impressive. But the intact family, so people on public assistance, particularly in America, they don't stay there. But this is still interesting looking at intact biological family. 10% of people raised by intact biological family are taking some kind of government assistance. And this does not surprise me. Gay father is the second lowest. One reason this does not surprise me is if you're looking in terms of income and professional outcomes, LGBTQ individuals tend to outperform the heterosexual norm. It'd be a whole different video to kind of talk in my thoughts on why, but gay folks tend to be more successful than straight folks professionally. So it does not surprise me that the gay father would be the second lowest. It surprised me as second lowest, but it doesn't surprise me that was a statistical norm. What really does surprise me is, it doesn't surprise me to see adopted coming in. Why is everything highlighting? Darg. Adopted coming in at 27 at the third best, and single parent and step family pretty similar, but a significantly higher lesbian mother, and that one kind of surprised me. Yes, I know what the definition is. Stupid touchpad. All right, going on to unemployment. This is probably going to look very similar. And wow, there are some similarities. So intact biological family, IBF, 8% of people of the young adults raised in IBF are currently unemployed. Then the study took place in, I want to say 2011. Can I find the year here? So this was kind of at the end of the Great Recession is when this took place. Just to put that in context. So if you see these as relatively high youth unemployment measures, that's not uncommon for a recession type era where people with more work experience or more ability to work longer hours because they're not in college, they're not a young parent. So what happens in those situations is older people tend to fill up the marginal jobs, and young adults tend to get forced, and teenagers get kind of squozing out of the job market. So that's why these are higher than you would think overall. Once again, the IVF, intact biological family, best possible outcome. But step family and divorce later, we can kind of talked again, father with a gay relationship, also not statistically significant. It is interesting for me that adopted and mother in a lesbian relationship are the two highest. I have no idea how to put that together, but my primary purpose here is to go through the data. Perceived safety and security in the family as a child. So who felt safest? Who perceived their life as safest in their family structure? It was a scale 1 to 5. 5 was the safest. Highest safe outcomes reported by the kids. And again, this is not an outside judgment. This is a collection of the data of what the kids said they experienced themselves. Intact biological family, 4.13, so very safe. Next safest is adopted, and then single parent and step family are also relatively high, as well as divorced later. The least safe feelings are father had a gay relationship, and the absolute least safe is mother in a lesbian relationship. This makes sense. I've been doing a lot of research this week, and one of the things that I came across this is 2022, in the most recent domestic violence is women in a lesbian lifestyle report roughly double the domestic abuse rates of domestic abuse rates of heterosexual women. So it's a real tragic aspect of the lesbian lifestyle. I don't understand why that number is so low. Suicide, okay, and the best possible suicide outlook is a tie between the intact family and a single parent, which okay, and have recently thought about suicide. Best results: intact family, biological parent. Close on is adopted. Again, no surprise. And this yes, stupid touchpad. This then continues to follow the what we would expect. Divorce later 8, and then step family 12, and then not significantly higher for mother with a lesbian relationship, significantly higher father with a gay relationship. This is also not a real surprise. When you look at the incidence of depression and suicidality among gay males. Probably the best study that I've ever encountered on this one comes out of Denmark in 2011, where they analyzed. Denmark has national health care and is a famously gay-friendly country. So they've had domestic partnerships for generations. And because they have a nationalized health care, the government can just go through everyone's medical records with a push of the button. And when they did that, they found out that men in kind of the holy grail of gay culture, men in registered domestic partnerships in Denmark, so not a homophobic country, not an isolated culture, and these are the people who have found the person that they've considered the one. They had 8 times the suicide rate of heterosexual men successful. That was not counting attempts or depression, which we'll get to in just a second. So seeing a higher number with a father with a gay relationship, that kind of makes sense. That fits the other data that I'm aware of. Okay, so have been in or were in therapy. This is least likely to be in therapy, intact biological family, late divorce. That's kind of a surprising second place. And I don't know who did the coloring on this one. Step parent 13. This 19% tie between mother with a lesbian, father with a gay relationship, which is slightly higher than a step family and nowhere near as high as adopted. And I find this kind of interesting. I don't see this number as a particular negative. We have seen the adopted category come in on lowest or second lowest on most of these. But I think being willing to deal with issues is not necessarily an indicator of negative outcome. It can be an indicator of openness. So this is kind of a neutral statistic for me, but there you have it. All right, average current levels of depression, being the highest. And this is quite interesting. Once again, 1 to 4. 4 is the highest level of depression. Lowest possible is intact family structure. And coming in next, step family and adopted. Again, no surprises there. Step parents actually is a little better than that. And then the significant deviation. So divorce later starts to edge higher, and then both gay father and lesbian mother are the children of those families reported the highest levels of depression. Were ever sexually touched by a parent or other adult. Lowest possible incidence of this form of childhood sexual abuse is intact biological family. Second lowest adopted. Third lowest father with a gay relationship. Interesting. We've got a tie between step parent and divorce later. Single parent and divorce later. Step family, second highest, and this kind of follows the cliche of someone brought into the household who doesn't have a biological allegiance to the child. This is the creepy stepfather, stepmother trope in abuse circles. But the highest incidence of sexual exploitation by another adult is lesbian mother. But I want to look at this, right? That, putting it like scoring it like a horse race is one thing. This is such an important statistic. I want to dig into a little bit deeper. It is a 2% incidence for intact biological family. And there's simply no comparison. Adopted kids, 50% more likely to be touched sexually by a parent or other adult. In my ministry work, I deal a lot with survivors of sexual abuse and perpetrators of sexual abuse. Something most people aren't aware of is this statistic is really only going to catch half of it, because in the United States, at least, roughly 50% of all criminal sexual assaults are perpetrated by minors. And so you can basically take this number and double it to get your overall incidence of childhood sexual abuse non-penetrative, because that's going to be the next one. So 50% higher for adopted kids, 3 times the childhood sexual abuse rate for father had a gay relationship, 5 times the childhood sexual abuse rate for a later divorce or a single parent, 6 times the childhood sexual abuse rate for a stepfamily, and no, you did not read that wrong, 11 times more likely, higher rate, reported rate from the children for childhood sexual abuse by a lesbian mother. Now we're going to go and forced to have sex against their will. All right, so we've gone from the general childhood sexual abuse to rape. All right, and yes, I'm not going to get gender specific on this one. The numbers are well established, and a little bit of detail will go a long way. All right, trying to continue to power through this study. 8% is the intact biological family, and the closest, so the safest childhood environment in terms of penetrative sexual exploitation, safest by far intact family. The tie for second is double the rape rates of an intact biological family, and that is single parent and step family. But hang on, it gets worse. Adopted, divorced later, and father in a gay relationship, 3 times the rape rate of the intact biological family. Mother with lesbian relationship, rounding up a little bit, 4 times the abuse rate. That's a 1% off from 4 times the abuse rate of the intact biological family. Have ever contracted sexually transmitted infection? Again, some intern was sleeping on the coloring here. So the best sexual health in terms of infection, best sexual health possible, intact biological family. Runners-up are divorced later, which is 50% more likely. 60% more likely, single parent. 80% more twice as likely, adopted and step family. And going in for 2.5 times more likely, mother in a lesbian relationship, 3 times more likely to contract sexually transmitted disease is father in a gay relationship. Quality of current romantic relationship, average 1 to 5. 5 is highest. So the children of what types of families are most satisfied with their romantic lives? Intact biological family leads the pack with a 4.11 average. Next highest is a tie, single parent and divorced later. And a virtual tie and step family and adopted. And this adopted really should be colored in if step family is. And then lesbian beat the lesbian mother in a lesbian relationship did beat step family and adopted. And the least content young adults with their romantic relationships were children with gay fathers. Number of times judging current relationship to be in trouble. So this is kind of a measure. The sociologists are measuring stability, their ability to maintain a stable romantic relationship. So the least amount of trouble in young adult romances are from children with an intact biological family. And we're going to work our way up here. Single parent next is the next most stable. Tie between step family and adopted, and yet for some weird reason, Mr. Coloring intern skipped adopted. Divorce later is second highest, and the most tumultuous, most troubled relationships reported from young adults came from gay fathers. Had an affair while married or cohabitating. The most faithful, and this is one of the few times you're not going to see the intact biological family as the highest, is the divorce later, all right, or joint custody. So later divorce or joint custody folks had the lowest amount of affairs, followed by the intact family. There's a 1% difference there. Single parent is the next lowest, and now we are looking at about 80% higher infidelity among adopted off of the standard of divorce later, about the same single parent. And step families and mothers in a lesbian relationship are the least faithful of the kids, reporting the least faithful relationships. Education, highest level of education achieved. This one surprised me because I'm well aware and have been for decades that people in the LGBT lifestyle tend to economically outperform their other sociological indicators. Not surprised the intact biological family had the highest level of education. I really had expected lesbian mother and gay father to equal or perhaps surpass this, given the outcomes that I know. Adopted, actually, so adopted 3.21 is highest, 3.19 intact biological family is very close, and then working our way down the list, divorce later, single parent, then step family and gay father tied for second to last, and the lowest level of education outcome were from children of a lesbian mother. Among women, number of different female sex partners, average. So this is an incidence of lesbian activity as a sociological outcome. So lesbianism is on a 1 to 10, it's 0 to 11, it's not a 1-to-1 scale. So lowest incidences of a lesbian activity, I like to be specific, between feelings and activities. It's important in the ministry circles I stomp around in. Lowest is intact biological family, and we've got second lowest is adopted and step family or recombined family. Single parent then at 0.52. Divorce later 0.96. There's I'm guessing some disillusionment there. And interestingly, mother of the lesbian relationship was not the highest on this one at 1.04, and father had a gay relationship as 1.47 was the highest. Number of male partners, and I'm openly against promiscuity, so I consider the lowest number better. If you were, raised with the ethics of like Playboy magazine or something, then you may disagree with me, but you can be wrong. Okay, so the most faithful, least promiscuous people. Intact biological family. Second best is adopted. Divorce later, interestingly enough. Lesbian mother 4.02. Single parent 4.04. Step family 4.57. And then gay father 5.92, which is really quite the jump. Is more than double the infidelity rate of the intact family. Men's male partners, so we're talking incidence of male homosexuality. 0.2 for intact family. Adopted, second lowest, 0.27. A bit of a jump here for single parent and step family at 0.42 and 0.55 respectively. This is a 1 to 11, 0 to 11 scale. Divorce later comes in. All right. My fingers. Divorce later in terms of men with sex with men, 0.98. Second highest, 1.47 with father with a gay relationship, and 1.48 as highest with mother had a lesbian relationship. Sexual orientation, identifying as heterosexual or straight. This one's not going to surprise anyone. The highest number, 90% of intact family kids identified as entirely heterosexual. So no some this or some that. Just cis normal, hetero cis normal. If you want to use that kind of terminology. So that's 90% for the intact biological family, and then a tie at 83% for second place with single parent and divorce later, 82% and 81% nearly, statistically identical for step family and adopted. No idea why the coloring intern skipped adopted on that, and yet filled in single parent. But a massive decrease in fathers had a gay relationship at 71%. So that is filling it in. 29% of young adults with a gay father did not identify as straight, and 39% of young adults with a lesbian mother identified as straight. All right, so that is the data, and summing it all up, there's been a couple really good reviews in the peer-reviewed literature. This is obviously a lot more detail than I want to go into. I'm going to give you my conclusions. There are plenty of articles, and you can, of course, find this. It's just FamilyStructureStudies.com. It's available for anyone. And, there was the purpose, and there's good frequently asked questions. So my takeaway from this is not that the outcomes for children, particularly in the areas that I deal with a lot of adults dealing with the consequences of childhood sexual abuse. So this is probably the touch sexually enforced sex or statistics, where where you find the most dramatic differences. 2, 3, 4 times the rate of an intact biological family. That matters to me very, very passionately. Seeing 11 times the the non-penetrative childhood sexual abuse rate among lesbians. But what you're going to find as we continue to go through these, and I'm just kind of flip through, is the church, particularly American Christianity, while you can't really go to this and walk away with the, approached theory of, that homosexual parents are just as healthy and just as productive for the well-being of the children by all of these metrics, which is going from emotional health to drug use to education, they simply don't compare with the intact biological family. And depending on what negative outcomes like childhood sexual abuse, rape, you're looking at 4 to 11, 2, 3, 4, up to 11 times higher incidences of these reported by the children of these families. Right, this isn't some Bible bashing independent Baptist hate monger in Tennessee. And wow, those guys. This is not the Family Research Institute or Focus on the Family. This was an immense sociological study, and this data is self-reported by the young adults who had grown up in these. And they're just comparing and contrasting them. I love the methodology of this, but there is no way of getting around the fact that whatever your political or religious opinions might be, if you are genuinely concerned about the welfare of the children, there are some serious questions to ask. If I were a judge or a magistrate and I was asked whether or not it would be appropriate to award custody of a minor to an environment with 11 times the abuse rate of another, right? So going with the touch sexually reporting. Giving a mother and a lesbian relationship compared to a single parent, neither of those are particularly good numbers, but you're talking about more than doubling the childhood sexual abuse rate for that kid. About doubling the childhood sexual abuse rate, between staying single and pursuing a homosexual relationship. And for people with same-sex attractions, or transsexual identities. I really got to go with kind of a, think of the kids on this one, because the outcomes are not good, and the numbers aren't holding up. As in 1995, when these debates were going on and we didn't have these numbers, okay, but it is 25 years later, and the numbers are out. And it's one thing to take your opinion, the other way. Take your opinion and kind of speak into silence from both sides. And it's another thing entirely to take established facts, deliberately ignore them because you have an agenda. That's a different form of child abuse from one side or the other. The other thing that I'm going to point out here, and this is for the heteronormative, the straight community and the religious churchianity folks, do not. I really hope that you look at this and come away humbled. If you look at this and said, "Oh, well, gay parenting is just the worst," no. Do you know how many times we clicked on these and gay parents were like in the middle, and the worst were divorced later, or single parent? And this is taking the effect that if you're talking about, the homosexual community is best sociological data 2.5 to 3.5% of the population, but these heterosexual, quite openly adopted, not condemned, not pressured, not campaigned against family structures that are harming children again and again, but because they're straight, then we're wink nudging them 3 times the welfare rates for single parents, step families, and adopted and divorced. That's you, right? That's the 97%. That's the 96% of the straight population that our church is like, oh well, no, 1,000 times no. So I got to end this with a call, with the words of Jesus Christ from the Gospel of Matthew. You hypocrites! How can you look and see a speck, a little speck in your neighbor's eye, and ignore the log in your own? The domestic church, and one thing that the New Family Structure Study really, really should be driving home, and anybody who got their eyes open, who's paying attention to more than whether or not somebody's outlined in a rainbow in the visuals here, is single parenting, step families, later divorces. You're doubling, tripling, sometimes quadrupling the negative outcomes for kids in justification for a lifestyle that God's word just flat out condemns. And until the church really wants to deal with the consequences, gets really serious about reforming the consequences of heterosexual sexual immorality, the fornication of the single parent, and some single parents, the parents died, or there's market infidelity, but that's by no means the majority. And I acknowledge some step families are trying to do their best, and in most of these we're finding out that they're better, that most of these step families and adoption, but the heterosexual church, the heterosexual society, should not take this as a stick. Absolutely should not be taking this measure as a stick to beat up on the sexual minorities, which is not to say that the statistics for the sexual minorities are not terrible. I'm sorry about the political correctness. You're never going to get me to say, oh, well, being raised by a lesbian mother only multiplies your chance of being of childhood sexual abuse by 11 times, so just shut up about it. No, that is never going to happen. But neither am I going to shut up about calling to repentance for the church at large when you are looking at 2, 3, 5 times the negative outcomes for compared to an intact biological family. God, back in the 90s, Christian apologist Dawson McAllister pointed out that every time God says no, he's saying 2 yeses. Right? God will say no to some behavior because yes, he loves you, and yes, he wants what's best for you, and God, being perfectly wise and just, knows what's best, and a lot of his rules come down to that. If you ever really, really want to blow your mind, get in touch with a good microbiologist or a pathologist and go through the climate in the Middle East and the old Mosaic purity laws. They're going to blow your mind. The disease decrease and prevention. Circumcision alone they've found has like a 71% decrease in contracting HIV among men. And that's like one thing. It goes, cancers, etc. The big bunny trail I could go down. I'm not going to go through, but God's commandments for marriage, one man, one woman, one family, are absolutely and irrefutably what's best for the kids. And if you and I have never really encountered a parent who will not at least say that their child's well-being is the most important thing in their life. So if that's the case, get your act together. And so if the best thing for the most important person in your life is an intact biological family, which typically is going to mean waiting to have sex till you're married, only having sex with the person you're married, being faithful, being devoted. Read Ephesians chapter 4, right, about how husbands and wives are supposed to love each other and serve each other, so you're not neglecting and abusing each other, but you're living a loving relationship. Not only is that the best for your kids, it's absolutely the best for you if your kids are the most important thing, as every parent I've ever encountered has said. So yeah, the facts as reported by the survivors of various families are, particularly for the LGBT community, but by no means exclusively for the LGBT community, are horrific. Outside of the intact biological family, there's simply no comparison for the outcome for the kids. That being said, there is. And while the numbers are quite terrible in many respects, not necessarily financially, there was a couple that were really good for children with LGBT parents. That being said, the best thing that Americans can do for society, if they care about the outcomes of the children's society, is to encourage the intact biological family. There's simply no debate. This completely seals the deal. This is such a huge study, and the numbers are so large, and the disparities are so huge. I really wish I could get everyone to read this study, but this is it. I'm going to get this uploaded. We'll see how quickly YouTube can cancel this video and see whether I have a channel afterwards, because this has got to be one of the most politically incorrect things I've ever done. God's richest blessings, and take care.